Hi, welcome to another video. I'm sure you love all these by now. We are talking today about the native wars or the wars with the Plains Indians and westward development. In class, we're doing all kinds of readings and different strategies, DBQs, that kind of stuff, with a lot of visual aids. But this is just going to be kind of a main idea summary of it in case you miss class and you just kind of want to understand how to put the textbook readings to meaning, or if you just kind of going back through and reviewing for the test, you don't understand the big idea. And the big idea is kind of tricky because the American treatment of natives is one of the main sins, for lack of a better word, of the American story, right? The American history story. And so how we handle this in the present day matters quite a bit, right? How we talk about what we did, and how we move forward from what we did. But what we criticize also matters too, because certainly there was an occupation of land before the American Empire expanded. And yes, we stole, however you want to phrase it, land, but this is what empires do. Empires expand. And if we're looking at this from a neutral perspective, like if I wasn't with this flag right here, if I wasn't an American citizen, if I was a historian 100 years from now, we would talk about the way we talk about the Romans, right? We don't criticize the Romans' moral failings. I suppose maybe we should, but they expand their empire, built roads and cities, and we talk about how they did that, how they managed to control a major part of the earth. And we're doing that with the Americans too. Like, this is an empire. It's taking its industrial and modern empire and it's expanding, and it's bringing with it its economic systems and culture. And when those economic systems and culture engage with the natives, right, we get the results that we get. This is when we can criticize, right? Once we've taken this land, once we've expanded this empire into, from sea to shining sea, how we treat the natives then matters. And the way we talk about that matters. But I don't think there's a world in which the American empire doesn't settle the West, tear up the prairie grass, kill the buffalo, and turn it into farmland. So keep that in mind as we go through this. And also keep in mind our theme of the West here, right? This is idea of egalitarianism, individualism, liberty is not being extended to natives in any sense of the word. And so if we're looking at the West only through the Turnerian like view of, hey, the conquest of Anglo-Saxon civilization, then you're going to have a very different interpretation than if you're looking at it from the view of minorities and the natives, right? And that's important to understand too. Okay, let's get on with it. First off, important to understand, Plains Indians were nomadic. They wanted to follow the buffalo around. Any piece that we do that doesn't protect the nomad lifestyle is going to be flawed. There's no good solution right off the bat, right? Because we're turning this into a settled farmland. Natives want to be nomadic and follow the buffalo. We're going to kill the buffalo, and they can't do this anymore. And so you can't take this place and still protect native culture in the sense of like keeping native culture in place the way it is, right? At least not with the Plains Indians. No, it's not to say that there wasn't a better way to do it, because there absolutely was, but that's just where we are to start off with, okay? All right, and one of the first plans for peace we tried was the Indian Peace Commission, which was to provide protected reservations with structured annuity payments, so cash payments every year, in sovereign land, right? This is classic 1800s America. We're not trying to integrate. We don't want to integrate. It's you have your land, we have ours, we mind each other's own business. And that's not what the Americans do. See, natives don't want to be on reservations, but even if they are on reservations, they're on reservations because they're forced to be, right? And if you're forcing someone onto a reservation and into these treaties, and then you violate those treaties, you're not establishing peace. And the settlers continually move on to these reservations. Their annuity payments are stolen by corrupt government officials. It's not a plan that works. And it maybe could have worked if these treaties are honored. But we ask in class, what is the motive of a person in power, of an empire in power, to protect the rights of people like the natives? Besides upholding its own value system, there is none. And so we continually don't. And that's the problem. That's where we criticize, right? Because if we say we are an empire that is about these things, liberty, egalitarianism, individualism, justice, we have to be about these things. And so we criticize the actions of the United States during this time, right? Because we weren't. And that's it, right? We were going to take this land. We're going to win the native wars. And so what's next, right? Okay. Now, along with that, there's one example here. This the flight of the Nez Perce with Chief Joseph, right? Their treaty is not honored. Settlers keep moving on their land, and the army was going to forcibly relocate them to a smaller reservation. And they're like, why would we honor this treaty? We don't want this treaty in the first place. So they run. And eventually they're caught and they move to a territory in Oklahoma. But like, okay, so this is a great example. We're trying to force people into treaties that we don't follow. So what happens? Conflict. Any peace commission is going to fail. And moreover, we get stories like the Battle of Little Bighorn. Let's see if I can get this off my screen real quick. Oh boy, now we're really messing up. All right, so the Battle of Little Bighorn. All right, we break a treaty. We invade Lakota Sioux territory. They refuse to leave the reservation. Okay. The largest fighting force of natives ever assembled is there. George Custer doesn't follow orders, and he tries to attack this force. George Custer is killed, right? And it's a major loss, right? Like it happens fast, okay? It's the way that we portray it afterwards, that these newspapers are going to talk about this as a massacre, right? And they're going to push this narrative, and that narrative is natives as savages. And that narrative continues to be pushed, which is going to justify not making native citizens and treating natives in a certain way, particularly in that at Wounded Knee, right? So after this, we're going to increase our action against the natives, right? We're going to step up our wars, and it leads to tragedy, right? And eventually, after Wounded Knee, we're going to try a new plan for peace. It's called the Dawes Act. Now, the Dawes Act is going to try to assimilate or bring natives into our culture, but it does that without making them citizens and giving them the rights of citizens and protecting them in that way, right? They end up splitting the reservations into 160-acre plots like the Homestead Act, and we're trying to make them homesteaders, right? But they don't want to be homesteaders, and they don't have the skills to be homesteaders, and they're put on land in the Great American Desert after the bust of the Wheat Belt. This is not enough land. It's not enough to put them into positions of success, and we're delaying their citizenship. None of this is a way that's going to actually bring natives into our society where our cultures can mesh and we can create something new out of it, right? Instead, it just leads to more animosity, more poverty, and a lack of protection of rights, right? So it's going to fail. The land's too small. We don't give them any training. They don't have any motives. And then at some point, at least the reservation provides a place where they can be their culture and their way of life, right? So we eventually go back to the reservation system. We have reservations even today, just down the road here. But these plans for peace fail, and they fail because of our attitudes toward natives and our refusal to treat them as human beings. And so in the modern day, when we talk about natives and we talk about what the Americans did to create their empire, of course we're going to criticize this. And we criticize this because we need to continue to treat people as full citizens and full humans with respect and empathy. And so we can understand why any violation of these reservations or treaties are going to be met with protest, right? And we'll kind of leave it there and let you reflect on what the modern world ought to do about this. How do you move forward? Admitting that you've done a wrong act, how do you make that right over time? These are questions for our modern day world. Nevertheless, understanding kind of the reality of the West, how it was conquered is important to understand. See you in the next one.